So do you mind giving us, so a lot of people know who Dan Wells is, but for those who don't, do you mind giving us just like a 1 minute, or we could even give it if you want us to, but I don't
Oh,
know if it's
I'm
better.
I'm happy to 10 minutes into the podcast to finally introduce myself. My name is Dan Wells, and I am an author of kind of everything. I've got 20 books published. Most of those in print, but there are some that are audio originals, and there's no print version of them. I have written for movies and television and video games and tabletop games and everything. If someone is willing to pay me for words, I have at some point written them words. And I am very excited to be here. Oh, how about I tell you specifics? I wrote I Am Not a Serial Killer, which is my how-to book. I am a New York Times bestselling author thanks to the Partial series, which is YA dystopia post-apocalyptic thing about a plague that kills everyone. So everyone loves to read that one these days.
Serial killers and plagues,
Yeah, I don't write about happy people. I write about sad people making bad decisions.
um, I know you mentioned so we met at FanX. We'd met before. I don't know if you
Yes.
remember us fanboying at you a couple years ago.
I
We do it
do.
every year. Okay.
We love to fanboy hard.
We even left you a photo of ourselves. We call that Inception when we go and give people photos of ourselves, because then later it's like, I do kind of remember them.
Wait, I think I
Unsolicited
remember you.
photos.
I, at this point in my career, assume that if somebody says hello to me, I have met them several times before. And so I just treat everyone like an old friend. And now I'm stuck doing this podcast tonight. So.
Exactly.
Could have been eating some KFC, but instead you're hanging out with us.
I actually did just come from a fried chicken place. So you've got my number pretty well.
I love that. Johnny, I was just going to say how to I Am Not a Serial Killer is right here. And then Dark One Forgotten. I made the backs myself. This is just I'm kidding. Could you imagine? You're like, it's not that thick.
Leather bounds of my audio only book.
Yeah, it's the Chronicle series right here.
Well, there's just a CD in there.
One of the forms that Dickens worked in a lot was fake podcast.
Johnny, I know you had a question for Dan. I've kind of been yammering, so my excitement is finally weaned a little. So I will let Johnny ask a couple questions.
He's super excited,
man. Okay, so I've been in this call for 7 minutes. Jay's already done.
He's not. He just goes hard. He goes too hard. He needs to learn how to calm down. That's why there's two of us here. We can't do it. But we're just gonna shotgun some questions. That's what we do. Dan, can't thank you enough to be on. But what has been your favorite genre to write? And I know everything you love, but has there been one lately in the past, let's say 5 years, where you've been, I need to write more fantasy. I need to write more of this.
Boy, 5 years.
Yeah, just recent time.
Yeah. The recent things that I've done have almost exclusively been audio, though I am starting to bring out some print versions of them, like the Zero G stuff, which is my middle grade series, Ghost Station, which is my actually, I think Ghost Station too old to be in the last 5 years? I don't know. Either way, historical fiction about spies. Honestly,
yeah.
What I have absolutely adored writing most recently was I did some work for a video game called Moonbreaker. And this is it's a game it's in early access right now. Brandon did all the world building for it, and then I wrote a bunch of kind of radio show audio dramas for it. I think I did 4 or maybe 5. And I loved it. I really liked Charlie Cleveland was the main guy that I worked with there at the company, who was kind of the creative director that I, had to get all my approvals from when I would come up with crazy ideas. And I loved that. And it was very much in kind of the old radio drama style where there is no narrator. it's like you're watching TV with your eyes closed, and all of the information has to be conveyed audibly. There's no visuals, there's no narration, there's none of the tricks that we rely on in other formats. And I loved that. The game is not widely available yet, but when it, if you can find it on early access, please give it a look, because it's a wonderful game. And I just had a ball writing these kind of goofy space opera stories for them. I say goofy, but some of them were very serious. Some of them were scary. Some of them were funny. Some of them were adventures. It was a really fun project to work on.
That sounds awesome. We're gonna for sure be downloading that.
It looks really cool. I just looked it up real quick because we have internet in the world. The visually looks really cool too. It looks like a really fun game.
Mm-hmm.
You said Brandon.
Yeah,
I'm assuming Sanderson, right?
Yeah, Brandon said. I assumed no. It's a different Brandon.
Well, I'm just thinking.
He lives in Canada.
I'm assuming our listeners might not know that you and Brandon Sanderson are friends. So
yes. Yeah. Anyway, cool. Yay. It's a really good game, and everyone should check it out because it was a lot of fun to work on.
Sounds exciting. I'm stoked. No, we're big nerds, so anything you get your little hands in, that's what it's all about. Yeah, we play D&D. We play any story-based game. So
awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
One question I had, because you mentioned that you've done a lot of Audible lately, or just even audio. Do you have a favorite narrator? Even if they haven't worked for you, just in general, do you have a favorite narrator?
A favorite audiobook narrator? Oh, no.
Okay.
Good answer.
I like them all.
Good answer.
They're all good. I listen to audiobooks when I can, but here's the thing about me, and I assume this is true for many people. My audio processing is such that I can listen to an entire audiobook and then get to the end of it and remember everything that happened and not remember anybody's name. Like, for some reason, names just bounce right off of my brain. When I started working at Dragonsteel, as you mentioned, Brandon's one of my best friends. We've known each other forever. And now, as of a year ago, I am vice president of narrative at his company. He is my boss, and I am his manager. And we write stuff together. And so when I started there, he was like, you're going to have to finally read the Stormlight Archive. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read the Stormlight Archive. And I listened to books. I'd already read book 1. So I listened to 2 and 3 and 4 in audio, and then got into Dragonsteel and was reading book 5. And I was like, who's Teft? You need to introduce these characters. And he's like, Teft has been in this from the very first book, you idiot. And I'm like, oh yeah? Well, what about this other guy you keep mentioning? And he's like, yeah, that's like the main character. And so if I need to know who the people are in the stories, I have to read them physically instead of listening to them.
I get that. I just finished I'm Not a Serial Killer, and I'm like struggling to remember names now. But I can describe how they look down to very details and what exactly happened, play by play.
Okay, that's interesting, because I never describe the people in I'm Not a Serial Killer. So if you know what they look like,
well, hold on,
you know more than I do.
I know like ages, and I know like when one of them gets a little bit angry, he transforms, and I can describe that transformation. I can describe what it looks like when he claws into a certain someone by a lake. Because you do describe some of these people. The drifter you definitely describe.
That's true.
And then
the only description in 6 books that I ever give of John is that he has black hair.
Right.
You know
well,
nothing else about him.
I apologize. Maybe not the main, but there are. I'm just saying that there's no way that there aren't characters in there that are described, and maybe it's me just being like crazy and putting my own imagery in there. But
you're absolutely right. Don't worry about it.
But in my head canon, I know how they all look, but apparently some of them
Dan will just avoid us
me.
next year at FanXJ. It's fine.
When we were making the movie of Serial Killer,
we were going to bring that up, by the way. We were excited to talk about
Oh,
that.
okay. Well, here's my
Good
story
segue.
about it.
Good segue.
They cast Brooke, and I at this point cannot remember the actress's name because I haven't, stayed in touch with any of them except Chris a little bit. But they cast her, and she has black hair, and I'm like, it says very clearly in the book that she has blonde hair. And Billy, the director, said, Dan, that is the least important part of the character. What's your problem? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never done this before. And he said, just watch. And we watched her, and just the first scene that she did, which was the first scene that she recorded, or at least the first one that I saw, is she was walking down the street and she gives Mr. Crowley like a pumpkin pie or something. And just that simple thing, she was phenomenal. You could not take your eyes off of her. She just had so much personality and so much depth. And so immediately I was like, oh, okay, you're right. It doesn't matter what color her hair is. She's an incredible actor. In fact, let's go back even further. When we were trying to raise money to make the movie, the director's an Irish guy named Billy O'Brien, and he kind of contacted me directly, and we have very similar styles and very similar reasons for liking the story, and so that's why I said, yes, you're the one, let's do this. And then we spent about 6 years trying to raise money, and it was super duper hard because you walk into a Hollywood studio and you say, hey, I want to make a movie. The main characters are a 75-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy. You will get laughed out of the building because there's nobody in either of those demographics, at least at the time, that could headline a movie, except maybe Clint Eastwood. And we couldn't get Clint Eastwood, so they laughed at us. And several of them said, listen, if you want to cast a teenage girl, if you want to gender swap this and go like Jane Cleaver, then we're in. Let's do this. And Billy and I were strongly against that because both of us look at it as a father and son story. But once we cast this girl as Brooke and we saw her doing the scenes, we looked at each other and we were like, okay, we totally could have done Jane Cleaver with her because she's really good. So anyway.
That's pretty awesome. You mentioned Chris. I'm assuming that's Christopher Lloyd.
Yes, it is.
That's pretty cool. Just saying, like, in terms of people who have, like, I don't know. I'm assuming you've met him then. That was one of our questions was, like, how was that?
Yeah. So when we were filming, I was on set with them for 10 days. I did not get to meet Laura Fraser, unfortunately, because I had to leave before she showed up and did her scenes. But I got to meet everybody else, and they were all incredible, wonderful people. I was peripherally involved in the casting. I cannot claim credit for anyone except for the guy that played John Cleaver himself. He was the one that did Where the Wild Things Are, live action. And he was just phenomenal in that. And he was, like, I saw the trailer and I immediately texted Billy and was like, we need to get this guy for our movie. And he's like, let me watch the trailer. And then he said, okay, yes, you're right, we need to get him. And he was way too young because he was like 11 or 12 in that movie. And then good for us, it took 6 years to raise the money. So he was 18 by the time we started filming. And he's just incredible. That guy's going to have just an amazing career ahead of him. And I am not saying his name because I cannot remember anybody's name, as has been previously mentioned. But he was
Max Records.
really
I
wonderful.
just looked it up. It's fine.
Who? Say it again.
Max Records.
Max Records.
Yeah.
Oh, he was so good. Like,
It's a cool name.
I have learned so much about John Cleaver just from talking to him while we were like sitting around in the hotel waiting between scenes. He knew that character inside and out and had thought very deeply about things. One thing that I always used to love to do, because I never really described the characters, right? Mm-hmm. And so I not until book 5 did I actually lay down in canon what kind of music John prefers to listen to. And so I would always at signings and stuff ask people, what kind of music do you think John listens to? And Max said, oh, I think he listens to like just weird grungy garage stuff, very experimental stuff. And I'm like, you know what? That's absolutely right. I had never considered that, but he just knew exactly, and it was awesome.
Neutral Milk Hotel. That's from Parks
That
and
might
Rec.
be a little too mainstream for John Cleaver.
No, what I would have a really hard time doing is, because Christopher Lloyd's such a legend, I would have to quote something from Back to the Future in front of him, but under my breath, because you don't want to seem Hollywood. Were you tempted to say 1.21 gigawatts and like run away?
I never did that.
Okay.
I was able to hold that in long enough to not make an idiot out of myself, thankfully. But it was definitely like, I have met a lot of famous people in my career, and Chris Lloyd is absolutely one of the ones where I was like, holy crap. Do you guys see that? That's Christopher Lloyd. And they're like, yeah, we know, we hired him for this job specifically. But yeah, he was great. And he was so funny because he's Christopher Lloyd, right? He's been amazing since the 70s. He's got decades and decades of just incredible performances under his belt. And so a lot of my book takes place in the winter at night. And so it was freezing cold. It was sometimes we were in like Michigan, and that kind of north central, right up by the Canadian border kind of area. And it was sometimes 30 degrees below zero, 40 degrees below zero while we were filming. And he would sit in a car with the engine running, and we would work for like an hour getting stuff ready. And then we'd say, okay, we're ready. And he would come out and he would film a scene, and then he'd go back and sit in the warm car while the rest of us were out there slowly dying of hypothermia. It was awesome.
It was really cool because this year's FanX that we met you and begged you to be on our cast, he was there. Hold Back to the Future cast was there, so that was really cool.
We should have brought that up about 10 feet away. Johnny and I walked by.
Yeah, we can't afford pictures of everyone, but just being like close to him, it was different. It was a good. You could tell that he's established.
He's an awesome dude.
When we walked by, so it was Thursday when we walked by, and so things hadn't really picked up over there. We got in super early. We were able to skip the crowd with press badges. Anyway, when we walked by him, no one had made their way over to him, so it was kind of nice just because he was just pleasant and he hadn't been overwhelmed yet, and so he kind of, not that he would, but maybe, I don't know, we got overwhelmed when we had a booth, so, but anyway, it was just, he had a very pleasant aura.
Definitely overwhelming.
Yeah. Do you have any funny stories about that? Like anyone who just, besides us, okay, excluding us, do you have anyone who came over and just like fanboyed hard at you?
Yes. I'm trying to think of a good one to tell. Okay, so I'm going to tell this one because this was an absolute delight to me that strengthens me in times of sorrow. And again, because, as mentioned, I cannot remember anybody's name. I have had meals with this person. We are friends. I consider us good friends. She runs a bookstore in Birmingham, Alabama. I could not tell you her name if you had a gun to my head. But the very first time we met, I think only 2 of my books were out. And I was at Dragon Con. And I was walking down, the hallway between 2 of the hotels. And this, just started chatting with this person. And she said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And because we had both like just come out of the same book panel or something. And I mentioned that I was here with a book that I had written, and she said, "Oh, really? What's your name?" And I said, "I'm Dan Wells." And she said, "Excuse me a moment." And she turned around and walked about 5 steps away and jumped up and down and like screamed silently. And then she composed herself and turned back around and walked toward me and said, "It's very nice to meet you." And I loved that. And I love her. Sarah. Her name is Sarah with no H.
Ooh.
I don't know what the last name is. I'm lucky to get anything at all these days.
Have you ever seen a movie called Get Smart?
I have.
There's a scene where Steve Carell's like, "May I have the cone of silence, please?" And then he
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
steps away and turns it on. That gave off like that same vibe, same energy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best day of my life.
That's awesome. It is weird. Me and Jay, we haven't been recognized. All we get is like, yeah, I remember you guys from last year, and then keep walking. So it's really cool the first time someone remembers you like that. That must be a cool feeling.
It's kind of fun.
Johnny, go ahead.
No, Jay, you got it.
Okay, I was going to ask you. We're going to pivot pretty hard here, so enjoy that. What's your favorite
Okay.
Batman?
What's my favorite? Like, who is my
Actor.
favorite Batman,
Yeah,
or what's
yes.
my favorite Batman media, or what are we
Ooh,
talking
these are
about?
I
all
was
great.
meaning actor, but give us everything you got.
Okay, boy, if I had to pick a favorite Batman media, it would be The Dark Knight. That's the best Batman movie. Close second to that would be Mask of the Phantasm.
Ooh, that's a great one.
Third place, honestly, maybe second place, tied for second place, would be Batman Returns. I understand that a lot of people didn't like Batman Returns because it was too weird and it was too dark. Those are exactly the reasons that I love it so much. Yeah. As a kid, I got to identify with Batman, and now as an adult, I get to identify with Danny DeVito's Penguin, and it's just perfect.
That's why we kept this virtual. We were scared you might bite our noses. Like Scarring, by the way, is that film to me. So
I love it. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is the best Catwoman that's ever been presented in any format anywhere. It's just, I love it. Other than that, Batman.
So is Keaton your favorite Batman then, or who portrayed him the best?
Who portrayed him the best?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want to say Keaton because he did such a good job. I remember watching The Batman and thinking, Pattinson's really good at Batman and really terrible at Bruce Wayne, which I assume was on purpose because he was trying to show that juxtaposition. I think end of the day, I'm going to have to say Michael Keaton is my favorite of the Batman actors.
I really like that.
I've actually never seen any of the movies in which Ben Affleck is Batman. So maybe he's incredible and I just don't know.
Crowd consensus is that he's not, even though he actually is my favorite, and I get so much hate
Jay
for
loves Val Kilmer, but we'll call it.
I'm kind of an Adam West kind of guy.
I love the Adam West ones. I
No
remember
bodysuit needed.
I think Val Kilmer is my wife's favorite Batman just because of the lips. She was like,
Oh, he's a
yeah,
dashing
obviously
guy.
he's the best. Look at those lips. And I'm like, that is not the important part of Batman. And she said, that is definitely the most important part of Batman. So there you go.
Was seeing him in Top Gun, was that fun for you? I don't know if you saw the most recent Top Gun, but
I've not seen the most recent one yet,
Oh.
and everyone is appalled when I say that. I love the first one. I do intend to see the second one. I am waiting until I can see it in a really good theater with a really good sound system.
you know it was in theaters for like a year and a half because of COVID, right? Like
I don't go to theaters. I don't go out in public. What do you think I am? So
like
you were
stopped by
Fedora,
weirdos like
Jay.
us.
Come on. He's safe out there.
I
love
did go and see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem in a
it.
theater.
Wasn't that a great movie?
I loved it. That's my
I
favorite
laughed-
piece of Ninja Turtle anything. I think they hit it out of the park.
It was so contemporary, but yet made it feel nostalgic because I grew up with Ninja Turtles. That was when I was shockingly not expecting it, and then I was in my room alone watching it, laughing out loud. That's when you know it's good.
It was really good. I am excited for them to make more.
Ugh, love it. So Dan, I'll do another hard pivot here. You have is it? Whoop, I just lost it here. Dragon Con coming up? Not Dragon Con. Dragon Steel. You guys have that coming up in a few weeks?
Yes, the Dragon Steel Expo We're trying to come up with a really awesome name for it. And he does not take any of my suggestions because my suggestions are too wonderful for this world to accept. So anyway, we're never going to have, the Dragon Steel Derby or, any of these really good ideas. But yes, that is coming up in 2 weeks and it's going to be super cool.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't know a lot about, and then people always ask for my nerd card back when I bring it up to them.
So Dan, will you be cosplaying as someone in a mist cloak? Will you have a knife behind your back as a closet serial killer? What will we be seeing, or is it just the rabbit hat that we're going to see this year? What's on the table for us?
It's just me in a rabbit hat is what you're going to see. Yeah, I may or may not comb my hair. As you can see, it's kind of. I was wearing a hat today, and so it gave me like a faux hawk and this cool tuft of hair on the side. I never dress up. Like we did a big Dragonsteel Halloween party, and there were special prizes if you dressed in a Cosmere cosplay costume. And I wore my Grinch onesie pajamas. And then there was another guy there who was in Winnie the Pooh onesie pajamas. And I said, hey, come here, let's do this. And we got in the line and we were the last ones and we got up to Brandon. He's like, you don't get a prize. This is not Cosmere. And I said, yes, it is. I write for the Cosmere now. Hoyd canonically was Winnie the Pooh at one point in his life. And so I wasn't fired. So I'm going to assume that that's correct.
Yeah, those were the options, really. Like, you gave him a fork.
Yeah.
You can either fire me or Hoyd can have been
like
Winnie the Pooh.
Keep me in the Cosmere, and then canonically Hoyd is also Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is public domain now.
Oh yeah,
Hoyd
that's
can
right.
be Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
It'll be a while before Hoyd can also be Grinch, but keep your eyes open because it'll happen.
At some point when Hoyd eats honey, I'm just going to be like losing my mind. Like, I know that needs to happen now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When he flies with a little umbrella and sings about being a rain cloud, you know that is Dan Wells toiling behind the scenes, bringing truth to power.
So tell me, Dan, are there any books that you've always wanted to write but haven't yet that are in the super back burner that we might see in the next 10 years? I'm sure that's probably a terrible. This is probably how many books you have like that, right?
I have so many back burner books. Cool ideas that I would love to write someday. And so many of them are historical fiction. I did Ghost Station a few years ago, which is historical fiction about Cold War Berlin. And then I will, travel around, or I will read something and I will hear something and I will get an incredible idea. Here's the one I'm going to give you. Okay. This is the answer to the question. I don't think that I will ever be able to write this book, but our word for Cologne comes from a city called Cologne. That at different times of history, it's been in France or Germany. It's currently in Germany. The city of Cologne. It is called that. The reason we call perfume Cologne is because this city was the worldwide central hub. Like, you could get perfume anywhere, but if you got perfume from Cologne, then you were getting the good stuff. And so that meant that first of all, it was insanely expensive. And second of all, people would counterfeit it all the time. And they would sell Cologne branded cologne that actually came from somewhere else. And so the Cologne company, the name of which I can't remember, obviously, they actually employed professional perfume sniffers who would travel all around the world and try to sniff out fakes and then run them out of business. And this is happening, of course, in a period of time when we did not have international trade laws of any kind. And so they basically had to take enforcers with them. Like, if this French-German dude heads off to China because some other French-German dude is selling counterfeit cologne, there he can't really like appeal to any higher body because the guy says, well, I can sell it if I want and you can't stop me. And so he would take thugs and bruisers with him to, trash this guy's stock and get him out of business. I so desperately want to write the story of the professional perfume sniffer who beats up counterfeit perfume people. That would be incredible. That is my life goal, to tell that story.
Have you thought of a name?
The problem is, first of all, that even the company, I toured this building and I saw all their historic stuff and I bought their little books and I talked to all their people, and all they have is one line in the book about, yes, we employed these people to go around and smell fake perfume. And that's all they know. Like, even the company today, there's no record of who these people were or how they worked or what they did. And the amount of research required to tell a story, I mean, it doesn't have to be a true story, but even based on truth would be so much. It would be years of work, but it would be such a cool story.
I want to play a video game based on the cologne bruisers.
That would be sick.
Get that going.
Like Red Dead Redemption 2, but your cologne
wake up
bruisers.
As a cologne bruiser.
Press square to smell perfume.
Yeah. This one's real. You shall live.
There has to be a good name for that. It's such a unique concept. Have you thought of a name? Because sometimes the names come. Okay.
It's just my cool, like I keep it, it's very cinematic in my head. Maybe it's a movie script instead of a book. But yeah, it's just a guy with like a bunch of nasty looking pirates basically, and he sails around and he's the face man of the group. He's very posh looking and he goes into like a marketplace in India and he talks to the Raja there, and then he finds out that this poor Raja's been sold bunk perfume that's crappy and cheap, and then he helps him, like gives him some resources and a permit to try to track down the villains, and they end up on the Silk Road somewhere. It would be so good.
Oh, my eyes are
Steve Martin's nose from Roxanne, just that big long schnoz smelling around.
Or the child catcher on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
There we go.
That's a deep cut. A lot of people have not seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, well, I have read the book of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Didn't even know it was a book.
Yeah, and it's written by Ian Fleming, who wrote all the James Bond novels.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just bonkers. Like, you read a James Bond book and you're like, yeah, this is a macho dude. And then you read Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and you go, oh, okay. I didn't know that this guy did this. It's bizarre. It's so weird.
Outside of Ian Fleming and Brandon Sanderson, do you have a favorite writer?
Yes. Other than myself, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
It's hard to pick. Historically, I'm gonna go for someone like Victor Hugo. Love his stuff. I did my huge senior course in college on Dostoevsky and Joseph Conrad. Loved them. More modernly, I have loved everything I've ever read by Fonda Lee. I think she is absolutely at the top of the fantasy market right now. She is incredible. Yeah. I've got my whole little bookshelf over here. Who else do I want to send a shout out to? I cannot remember the name of it. The name of the author. I've met her. Sherry Priest. There's a lot of books, even by people that I love, where the book itself will just, this book's not for me. I can tell that it's good, but I just, it's for someone who isn't me, and that's fine. Not all art has to be for everybody. I can read any Sherry Priest thing and just slip into it like a glove. I love the way she writes, the style. It is so perfectly matching to my brain that regardless of the topic, I just like the way she writes. It's phenomenal.
I do have an. So you tipped me off to an author years ago. You won't know this, but that you did this. But years ago, I
Okay.
listened to a cast from you, and you talked about if you wanted like a really good horror, listen to The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. And so I've kind of dipped my toe into H.P. Lovecraft. I was going to ask, where does he rank? Like, would he be a top 50, top 20? I'm just curious.
Oh man, in authors, I mean that's the thing, right? He writes horror, and a really fun thing about horror authors, more so than any other genre, is that when you read what they write, you can see a little bit of who they are as a person, right? Because we write about what we're afraid of. And what was H.P. Lovecraft afraid of? Fish and foreigners. Like, that's every book, every story he ever wrote was about how some horrible person who wasn't white is scary and terrible. And so, like, as a person, he was clearly just not a good person. He was a racist dickhead. But I do like a lot of his writing. I don't know if I would put him up super high. For someone like that who's so foundational to a genre, I don't know where I'd place him. Like Mary Shelley and Lovecraft kind of sort of created horror as a genre. I mean, not together, and they're not even near each other in time. But those are the two I always think of as the godfathers of the genre. Maybe throw Anne Radcliffe in there as well. And the Brothers Grimm, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, and so they're not people that we can take out of the canon without time travel wise. If we get rid of all the Lovecraft books, then all the modern horror just kind of falls apart. But at the same time, does that mean he's a better writer, or does that mean he just came first? Mary Shelley. I love Mary Shelley. My daughter is reading Frankenstein in her English class right now, and she texted me yesterday to say, how is it possible to have a book this full of drama and terror and be this boring? And I'm like, well, yeah, you're right. Like it's writing styles are so different now from where they used to be that something that was not just new, but was shocking, something that was morally or literarily shocking and appalling 200 years ago is not going to be in any way shocking or appalling today. Um, and sometimes you can look at kind of the godfathers of a genre and say, yes, this still holds up. And I'm absolutely not going to suggest that Mary Shelley or Anne Radcliffe or H.P. Lovecraft don't hold up. But they were what they needed to be for the audience they were writing toward. And they aren't necessarily that anymore. On the other hand, you've got stuff like, the whole modern fantasy market to some extent owes its origin to Tolkien. And there are lessons from Tolkien that we still haven't learned. There's stuff that we ripped off from him, and we are now well past the point where fantasy is just an endless pastiche of Tolkien. We're decades past that point. But there are still things he did that we, for some reason, did not become part of the formula. And so we haven't been emulating them maybe as much as we should have. It is rare that I ever read a character who I think is as interesting and as deep and as flawed as Gollum. He is my favorite character, maybe in all of literature. And we copied all the fun stuff from Tolkien, and we really ignored a lot of the lessons he was trying to teach about characterization, and about the depiction of people and of flaws. Really, how did we get through our Tolkien ripoff phase culturally with Dungeons and Dragons became huge, but detailed emotional stories about addiction never caught on. Like, they're just not as fun.
When you pointed this out in a cast, that one of your favorite parts about Lord of the Rings is that Frodo makes it all the way and then doesn't drop the ring. Like, I remember, and okay, I have a confession. Sometimes you and Brandon talk, and I think you've been friends too long, because I sometimes have a hard time distinguishing when one of you stops and the other begins. And so, like, if I'm really into writing excuses, I'm like, who said that? But one of you, and I'm pretty sure it was you, 99.9% sure, that you talked about how interesting it was that Frodo doesn't actually drop the ring, that you made it all that way. And I don't know, can you talk about that at all? Just because that's like, you inceptioned my mind with that.
That was probably me, because I do think that that's, again, one of the really cool things that we didn't really take away is, I mean, he failed. It's, to some extent, it's a story about failure, but more than that, because it is not a full-blown tragedy, right? Like, one thing everybody knows, or no, I won't say that because lots of people don't. People who have studied Lord of the Rings know that Tolkien was overtly trying to recreate old Saxon epics like Beowulf. He was the Beowulf guy. He was, at the time when he was alive, there was probably nobody in the world who knew Beowulf better than him. And so when he wrote his own thing, he wasn't just writing fantasy, because fantasy didn't exist. He was writing his own Beowulf, and Beowulf's a tragedy. It ends with, Beowulf dying. Spoiler warning for this like 600-year-old story. It's actually way more than 600 years old. When was Beowulf written? It's over 1,000 years old. Anyway,
I don't know. That's still pretty recent.
yeah,
Has the statute of
Gotta yell
limitations been
spoiler alert,
lifted?
we'll get in trouble.
Anyway, spoilers for this millennia-old story. Beowulf dies, and it's sad. And I've ruined it now for everybody. Statute of limitations on Beowulf was over like when Jesus was born, so you can't complain. So yes, and so he puts that in, and it is a story of failure. But more than that, I think what's really going on in Lord of the Rings specifically is it is a story about friendship, and it is a story about kind of dealing with tragedy. It is not a story about everything goes wrong and we're all screwed. It's a story about everything goes wrong, but we're going to make it. We're going to be okay because we can work together. I keep mentioning Anne Radcliffe. She was a Gothic horror writer, kind of contemporary with Jane Austen, but writing Gothic ghost stories instead of romances, like Jane Austen. And she has one of my favorite literary quotes of all time, and this is horrifically paraphrased, but she said that fear is the emotion we feel when we're worried that something is going to go wrong, and dread is the emotion that we feel when something has already gone wrong and there's nothing we can do about it. And that is all over Lord of the Rings. Oh no, this has already gone wrong. Like, it is a literally post-apocalyptic story. The Shire is the one happy place in an entire continent full of ruins because Arnor fell. The great civilizations of the past failed, they were corrupted, and they died. And then Boromir, and then Denethor, and then everybody that we meet is being corrupted and failing. All throughout the story, up to and including Frodo. He is corrupted and he fails. But the big difference, what Frodo had that none of the rest of them had, were friends. He had Sam. He had the simple, not the big heroes, but the little simple friendships that keep us grounded and help us through stuff. And that is what saves the world. It's not a mighty hero throwing a ring in a fire. It's a couple of addicts squabbling over a needle, and then their friends come in and help them recover. And I think that is beautiful and so much more interesting to me than the mighty hero, kills the dragon or whatever. Which is not to say that heroes killing dragons are bad. I have those in my books, but
You're wrinkling my brain, Dan. You're wrinkling my brain.
Uh,
I
way
would
to make us think on a Monday night.
so because you've gotten so deep into storytelling now. I have a question that I've been dying to ask you.
Okay.
In your mind, what do you think the biggest failure of storytelling has been in the last 20 years? So like that, or like the biggest missed opportunity. So you could say something like some people would say Star Wars, some people would say Star Trek, some people would say
watch your tongue on
the
Star
Rings
Trek.
of Power. You know,
Okay.
whatever
So
it is.
you're not asking me for like, how did storytelling as a medium go off the rails and we as a species no longer tell stories correctly? You're asking me for like a specific franchise
Dan,
that
you were
just totally whiffed the ball.
I like when you ask us questions like to clarify. You present me with two juicy options, and I have been like, I don't know, like pick one. I want to hear about both. Yeah,
about both. I mean, I don't want to say Star Wars because I bet everyone would say Star Wars. But on the other hand, there's a very good reason that everyone would say Star Wars. I don't know how I was about to say get handed, but they weren't handed the reins of the most successful movie franchise ever. They spent billions of dollars on it. They went out and they got it, and they said, we promise we're going to do something awesome with this. And then they didn't. The TV shows have been very successful, and they have their huge fans. The prequel series is starting to get its renaissance, and people are starting to reconsider them. But and there may be a time 20 years in the future when everyone looks back on the sequel movies and is like, actually, these were not hot garbage. They had something really interesting going on. I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know how you can like just someone hands you the ball and you're 5 feet away from the goal line and you just don't run it over. You just run the wrong direction and you throw the ball into the stands and then you take off your pants. And like, how do you screw that up so profoundly and so immediately? I don't understand. Yeah, like bringing Star Trek back, Star Trek doesn't have a clear way forward, right? Mm-hmm. There's absolutely there's again decades of storytelling that has been done in the Star Trek universe. There are so many book series. There's fan made series and movies, and so many of them are just, oh, here's my crew and my ship, and these are the adventures that they have, and that works, and it's great. And then somebody finally decides to bring Star Trek back, and they make Discovery, which is not that, and doesn't want to be that, and thinks that you're a stupid person for wanting that. And then they finally get Patrick Stewart to come back, and instead of doing, yay, we have Patrick Stewart back, let's do Picard, they do season 1 of Picard, which was, nobody wanted that. And the people writing it just desperately wished that they were writing a different series instead, and none of it makes sense. And it took them several tries, and they finally have Strange New Worlds is phenomenal, Lower Decks is phenomenal.
Love Lower Decks.
They figured out how to do it right. And it took them a while because Star Trek doesn't have that obvious next step. I think Star Wars, people have been telling phenomenal Star Wars stories for so long in every other medium that exists. And then finally they get a chance to do it in movies, and they're just like, nah, we can do whatever we want. It doesn't matter.
They'll buy anything.
But if we're going to talk about storytelling as a whole, it's hard to say because, first of all, we're in a very specific section of human experience, right? Like what we can say about the American movie industry is not going to be true about the Chinese movie industry or the Indian movie industry or any of these others. But speaking of our industry specifically, it is deeply focused on the wrong things, by which I mostly mean it's deeply focused on money. And I am a professional artist. I do not begrudge any artist the chance to get paid for art, right? You're not selling out when you ask for people to pay you for your work. That's the whole point. That's how my children eat. But when the entire industry becomes about money over storytelling, then we end up with, the endless cycles of remakes and sequels and things like that. And we've been complaining about that for 20 years. That's nothing new. Um, we have the same thing now with streaming. Now that streaming has changed the way that television works, we have the Netflix cycle of let's make 5,000 season ones of shows, and then we'll only make one or two season twos because we care about is the one that hits out of the park. Clearly, the artists are out there making incredible shows, and then the people in charge of how long those shows get to exist are not interested in the art. They could say, yes, your weird experimental sci-fi show was weird and experimental, and it was profound, and it was moving, and it told us incredible things about the human condition. But you know what it didn't do is make as much money as Squid Game. So it's out. We're canceling it. And that focus is hurting us. And because so much of the media, it is difficult for most artists to get their work in front of people. Distribution has always been the problem. And there are exceptions to this, of course. The thriving fan fiction community of AO3 and Wattpad and all these other things where someone is writing their stuff and then they're putting it out and it is straight to consumer. They are not, for the most part, being paid. And if they are being paid, they're not being paid very much. I love fan fiction. I think it's vital and awesome, but it is usually not a career. You can turn it into one, like the Cassandra Clares of the world, by going mainstream, right? And saying, well, my fan fiction has been popular. Now I'm going to go to a traditional publisher and they're going to pay me for it. But then you're just part of the same machine that only really cares about money. And so we've seen, even in books, really wonderful stories that are not being told or not being continued. There have been fantastic series that just get killed partway through because not enough people are buying them. And this is really something we've done to ourselves. The blockbusterization of publishing that kind of started with Harry Potter and has just gotten worse and worse, demands that we have blockbuster successes, that we have giant tentpoles. And so all the little things just don't get made because, or they do get made, but they don't get distributed. So nobody knows that they exist. I predict, and this is absolutely just pulled out of my own butt. Okay. I predict that what we're going to start seeing with movies and TV is a massive gap. Everything is going to be either a $400 million tentpole movie that is a lowest common denominator, turn off your brain kind of thing, or it will be a $500,000 indie film made on an iPhone that can do anything it wants because they raised the money themselves. We saw this exact same thing going on in the 90s and this huge spike of indie films. And then that, in some ways, kind of changed the way that Hollywood worked, but really it was the technology. It was not the indie spike. We're going to see another indie spike. We're going to see indie, very cheap, small indie films becoming mainstream again because it's the only outlet to get certain kinds of stories. If you demand that every movie or TV show be a giant culture-defining success, then you're limiting your options of what kinds of stories you can tell. And there's no room left for the other stuff. And we are going to be a poorer species for that until we figure it out.
Just like Sheldon said on The Big Bang Theory, he blames everything on Firefly getting canceled. It all came from back then.
That's funny. Dan, we just hit an hour, so I don't want to take too much advantage of your time. Where you're at head-wise? You want to do 5 more minutes, or do you want to start wrapping things up?
I would love to do 5 more minutes.
Oh, perfect.
I think anyone who's still listening after Dan rants about the entertainment industry deserves something nice at the end.
Did you like Big Bang Theory? I'm just curious if you caught that reference.
I have never seen an entire episode of Big Bang Theory all the way through.
Just curious. Do you ever get flack for that?
No. I think that there are definitely people who feel like Big Bang Theory was laughing with us, and there are people who feel like it was laughing at us, and so it's that's one that is easy to sit in the middle. Like when I say no, I haven't seen Top Gun Maverick, jaws drop and people think that I'm, they hide their children from me. But if I say I didn't ever watch Big Bang Theory, then everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that.
I love it. Okay, so on a happy note, I have 2 quick questions. One is, what's your favorite food? And then the last bit, I just wanted to hear a rant about like some of your favorite things of the last couple of years, whether it's food or whether it's movies or whatever. And then we can close out. That'll be our last 5 minutes if you're cool with that.
Okay. Favorite food? That is hard to say. I have a very fraught relationship with my favorite food because my favorite food in the entire world is a chile relleno, which is Mexican food. Take a big green chili, pull out all the stuff in the middle, fill it with cheese, batter it in egg, and then fry it. My favorite food ever. I think it's the best food. When we all get to heaven, that's what we'll be eating. But I am lactose intolerant. And that lactose intolerance is relatively recent. That's like 8 years old. And I'm an old man, so 8 years is not a very large percentage of my life. And so I used to eat them all the time. I used to live in Mexico. I've eaten an unconscionable quantity of chiles rellenos.
Unconscionable.
But now I have to be very careful, and I have to take pills, and I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with chiles rellenos, and I don't yet know how I'm going to get out of it, or if I want to get out of it. So then what you've given me just the floor to rave about stuff?
Pretty much. Yeah. Like what should we be watching that we haven't seen, or what, like.
Okay. Here's the movie that I have been evangelizing to everyone for the last several weeks. This is a zombie movie called The Night Eats the World. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Oh, it's so good. It's from like 2018, something like that. It's about a guy in Paris who is in the back room of a party and falls asleep. And then when he wakes up in the morning, the zombie apocalypse has happened. And everyone's dead. And so he's relatively safe. He's in, an upper apartment of this big apartment building in Paris. He is able to get all the zombies either dead or out of the building. And then he just has to survive. And so there's a couple of kind of zombie scenes in it, but for the most part, it is a movie about loneliness and art. He's a musician, and he needs to find food, and he needs to just kind of entertain himself. What does he do? As the one person left alive in Paris who can't leave his house, how does he keep himself sane? How does he keep himself happy? And it's such a good movie, and I absolutely love it. And everyone should go and watch it. It's called The Night Eats the World. So, hooray! Let's see. TV-wise, I've already talked about Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. Everyone needs to be watching.
Lower Decks is amazing. Yeah.
Lower Decks is so good. Yeah. Shout out to Meg Lloyd, who's a friend of mine, and she directed 3 or 4 episodes
Oh.
of this season, and they're some of the very best ones. So, yay! I don't know. The other thing I'm watching right now is Supernatural, because I never saw Supernatural back when everyone watched Supernatural, because I'm late on lots of things, and so I am finally getting around to it, and I love it. Like, I don't like the cultural footprint that Supernatural had was so deeply embedded in fan theories and ships and stuff that I really didn't have a clear sense of what it was. It is brilliant. It is written so well. It's like the horror version of the X-Files, which is maybe my favorite TV show of all time. It's not. It's close. I'll talk about my favorite TV show in a second. But Supernatural is that, but with demons instead of aliens. And it allows itself to go into very weird directions, but always with a purpose. Like, even its goofball, we're just going to have fun this week kind of episodes have depth to them. The storytelling is brilliant. Sometimes, you will start an episode and the problem is one thing, and you think, oh, this is going to be the episode about X. And then it isn't. That's just how it gets you into. And then 5 different plots later, you figure out that the whole thing is about something completely different, but all of the various iterations you had to go through to get there work together to provide meaning to it. This is a meaningless sentence, but it has no business being as good as it is. Like, it's just really
it was on the
smart.
WB. What are you talking about? The CW.
Like, of course, it has every right to be awesome, and it is. And that's not news to anyone in the world except for me, because I never watched it until like 20 years later. So anyway, that's the story of Dan. My very favorite TV show of all time, hands down, no competition, is an Irish show called The Derry Girls.
Oh, yeah.
Derry Girls is about a group of teenagers growing up in Derry in Northern Ireland during the Troubles in the 90s. It is gut-bustingly hilarious and incredibly emotional at the same time. And it's 3 seasons. They're all finished. You can watch them on Netflix. They swear like sailors, so if that bothers you, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's my favorite TV show.
Awesome. Well, Dan, can't thank you enough. So for all our listeners, all your books are on your website, thedanwells.com, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, I'm going to pitch something else too.
Yeah.
When you go on my website, you're also going to see in the store, click on the store button.
Okay.
And then I am running in 2024 2, and it's going to be 3 game night getaways.
Oh, okay.
This is where I rent out like a vacation rental home for a week. And then I get a friend of mine named Donna. She's a caterer. She comes and we provide you with a house full of food and board games and nothing to do except sit and play. I did this last year and it was a huge success. We did role-playing campaigns. We did 10-hour Twilight Imperium marathons. I got to pull out giant Kickstarter board games that I never get on the table in any other circumstance. Huge, like, detailed historical war games that no one will ever play with me. And that's the whole point of it, is come and play games for a week. So 2 of those are currently up on the website. I'll be adding a 3rd soon because I want to do one that is very specifically like tabletop wargaming, Warhammer and that kind of thing. So anyway, everyone go sign up for those. One of them's almost sold out, but get them while they're hot.
That sounds amazing.
Perfect. All right, Knights. Go check out all of Dan Wells' stuff on Amazon, on his website, and do us a big favor and go listen to him because we loved it.
Yeah, remind us, current podcasts. So I know Writing Excuses was going for a long time. Give us, isn't it Shouting into the Void? Am I totally having a moment?
Intentionally Blank is my other podcast.
Sorry.
So Writing Excuses is 15-minute episodes of really helpful writing and publishing advice. That's me and some other authors and an agent, and it's all very informative and helpful and useful. And then my other podcast is called Intentionally Blank, which is just Brandon Sanderson and I trying to make each other laugh for like 30 or 40 minutes. And it is useless and pointless and delightful.
I listen to that one a lot at work. I put it on in the background. But for some reason, in a moment, I couldn't remember the name, so I apologize. I normally just type in Brandon and Dan, and it comes up. So I apologize for getting that wrong.
No worries.
Well, thank you so
Can't
much,
think
Dan.
enough. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll try to make it to Dragonsteel. It's coming up in a few weeks.
Yep.
Oh, we'll be there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you're there, say hello.
We will.
I need you to autograph a lot of stuff. It's fine.
Perfect.
We'll wear name tags too, so you don't have to remember our names. Just be like nerds.
Well, I recognize the T-shirts every time.
Yeah, that's what it is. It really is. There's one of the Evermore Park. He was like the creator, one of the head directors of Evermore Park. No idea what our names are, but like, hello nerds, hello. He's a British guy. We could find him anywhere, any nerd event. We would find him, and he would just look at us, go, hello nerds, and then just walk away.
Awesome. That's why we have them. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much. We will chat with you soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.